Greetings everyone, this is Rambling Collector here, and welcome back for another book review. And once again, we shall be diving into the world of Warhammer, but this time not in the universe of Warhammer 40,000. This time, we're going to be looking at Warhammer The Old World, with Lords of the Lance by Graham McNeill. So, to give a little bit of backstory here, Warhammer 40,000 has been covered quite a lot on this channel. And while Warhammer 40,000 will forever continue to be my bread and butter, especially with the franchise of Warhammer, I felt oddly drawn to the old world, specifically the old world of Warhammer Fantasy, which has just recently returned with a whole new model range. But no, I will not be diving into that. At least, not quite yet. Now, as for the books, on the other hand, I've collected at least a small handful of the old Warhammer Fantasy novels, which I will be covering on this channel. And as a fun way, this will allow me to change my playlist on this channel from Warhammer 40k Rambles to simply Warhammer Rambles. In this way, we'll be able to diverge a little bit and talk about some of the more fantasy aspects of the Warhammer franchise. But I think I've given enough context here, so let's move on with the book review, shall we? So, in my personal opinion, Lords of the Lance provided a great leading point into the setting of the old world, with its various houses, politics, and threats to humanity. Ranging from orcs to the rising Tomb Kings, this world, while not on the brink, still carries many dangers that humanity must still tangle with. So for context, a lot of the old Warhammer Fantasy books typically took place during the end times, when chaos was a much more prominent threat within that world, and eventually did lead to the decline of the old world, which then led, of course, into Age of Sigmar. Now, the old world, oddly enough, has a unique premise. It takes place before the end times of the original Warhammer Fantasy, meaning that while chaos is still a threat, it is not the world-ending threat that it was in the end times, meaning that now we have a greater chance to explore the old world and how different things were back then, without chaos as a prominent enemy. And instead, this allows for us to see them fighting more unique enemies, such as, of course, the orcs, whom you will see from Warhammer 40k as well. But in here, it's much more fantasy-based, but more than that, we also, of course, see the rise of the undead, and so many more unique enemies, and quite frankly, I am honestly all for learning more about the old world after this book. But more so than just the story, which, of course, the main premise of this story is a band of knights and lords traveling to the lands of the dead to uncover a missing son. The story is only one part, and of course, the characters are the main driving force. For example, Varro, the Knight of Quills, Lady Alicent, Carolina, and all the other warriors introduced throughout this story, all made for outstanding characters, each being granted their moments to shine throughout the book. Varro is a young knight looking for a chance at true glory, and instead trying to get out of the moniker of the simple Knight of Quills. Lady Alicent, a handmaiden to the goddess, the Lady, and at one point, the nearly betrothed of Varro. Carolina, the young heiress to Cassos Rock, on the Borderland Princes. And honestly, all of these characters were very fun to read with. It was awesome to see them all get their moments to shine as they were journeying through the lands of the dead, trying to find the secrets of the missing son and the brother of Carolina, but also just seeing how they worked well together. And then, of course, the surprise, the betrayal, the undead rising from their tombs and becoming a much larger threat. And the way the book ends leaves on a very nice hanger where, while the main plot is concluded, there seems to be more on the horizon. And I, for one, am very excited to see that. Especially, this leaves me hoping for a sequel to Lords of the Lance. But I will say, for one detracting point from it, is that the book does tend to drag on a bit in places, but that does not detract too harshly from the overall enjoyment of the story. This one in particular definitely took me a while, primarily due to the size of it, but I feel as though, while it did tend to drag, more often than not, there was always a great way to keep it going fresh and invigorating, to help me to crave to see more of how this story was going to end, how our characters would be able to get out of the situation that they found themselves in, running from the undead, trying to escape to safety. And, if anything else, The Old World seems fascinating. And even if this book is not for everyone, I'd say it's still an enjoyable little point, and to myself, this was definitely a great starting point, in my personal opinion. Let's move on, shall we? So, needless to say, this serving as my introduction to the Old World leaves me fascinated, for even more so, because as I've mentioned before already, I do have a small handful of books from the old Warhammer Fantasy title that I do plan on diving into one at a time, or perhaps in a sequence of 3 books to a video. We'll see how that goes. But overall, I'm still fairly excited to see just how different the world of Warhammer Fantasy is compared to Warhammer 40,000. Because one of the main things that I did like in the Old World, specifically reading this book, is that there is a sense of grim hope. It's not all-consuming dread like there is in Warhammer 40,000. There is still some form of lightness and hope that is prevalent throughout this book, and that to me was a nice change of pace. Warhammer 40,000, as much as I enjoy it, there are moments where it can just leave you feeling hopeless, as if no matter what, the war will never end, there will never be peace in the galaxy ever again. But with the Old World, there is that sense of joy, those moments of levity that allow you to truly connect with these characters and see that not everything is completely doom and gloom in their world, that there still might be a chance, even though we know, for those of us who have been around in the Warhammer fandom for a while, that the Old World itself is doomed to end. But of course, we will be saving that for the end times, which, to be completely honest with you, I cannot wait to read that little series to see just how everything ended. And I know that the end times definitely gets a lot of flack in the fandom, specifically for how rushed it felt with Chaos just winning. But even then, I am fairly excited to see how it went about, especially in literature-wise. Currently I have 2 of the omnibuses which collect the end times. I'm not sure if there is more, but if there is, I will be grabbing it. But needless to say, I'm going to be saving that for a full series review at some point down the line. But, if anything, this will allow me a greater chance to explore more of the world of Warhammer, more of the universe of it. Not just with 40,000, but also with the Old World now. And I'm fairly excited to see whether some of you may recognize some of these titles in the future, or if you may not. For all my fellow Warhammer fans, I think you might be interested to see which ones I found. But with that being said, let's move on to the overall score. So, I would have to give Lords of the Lands a solid 8 out of 10. As I said, this book does tend to drag in a few locations, but overall, it's still fairly enjoyable. And as a jumping point for me into the world of Warhammer Fantasy, I thought it did its job fairly well. I'll be very interested to cover more novels from the world of Warhammer Fantasy, as well as, of course, my personal favorite of Warhammer 40,000. But what do you all think? Is there any other Warhammer-related titles that you think I should check out? Or do you believe that there's other grimdark fantasy that you would want to see me cover on this channel? Please feel free to let me know your thoughts and comments down below. And if you have any suggestions for any future reads, please feel free to let me know those as well. I'm always eager for more opinions and thoughts and suggestions for further novel reading. And needless to say, at some point, you might see it pop up here on this channel. But with that being said, thank you so much to everyone who has stuck around to the end of this video. If you liked it, feel free to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe if you're interested for more. If you'd like to see some of the other Warhammer books that I have covered on this channel, I will leave a link to that playlist here at the end of the video. Or if you want to see some of the other books that are non-Warhammer related that I've covered on this channel, I will leave a link to that playlist as well. Thank you so much for listening to this crazy man's ramblings once again. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day, fellow readers.